lecturer, Mrs. Andrea Bowman, past headmistress of the St. Vincent Girls High School, Mr. Anthony Tibbles, cultural officer, Sir Errol Allen, staff of the University of the West Indies Open Campus, ladies and gentlemen, good night. It is my pleasure to stand here and welcome you to our annual Independence Lecture. And as you know, the University of the West Indies is celebrating 70 years of service and 70 years of leadership, which is a great accomplishment and we must be very proud. Tonight, I would like to welcome Pastor Terence Haynes to do our invocation and, of course, ask for God's guidance tonight on our lecture. Pastor Terence Haynes.
Good night. Buenas noches, todo el mundo. I invite you to stand. Let us bow our heads. Gracious and loving Heavenly Father, we come as a Caribbean family of diverse origins, experience, and culture, but as one to celebrate our national independence here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and more in a distinct way, 70 years of service and esteemed leadership of the University of the West Indies. We thank you for the opportunity that we can come not just to share academically, but we can fellowship, we can learn from each other, and best of all, we can have your presence with us. Tonight, you've given us your creation, your son, your featured presenter. We ask you will take control of everything that proceeds here forth, and in a marked way, you will endow the presenter, who will be soon introduced, with words of wisdom, because we understand wisdom truly starts when we fear you as Creator. So bless us tonight. Bring others who are coming safely. And all of us here, as we wait upon you and we listen to what you have prepared, we thank you in advance for what you will do. For we ask this through your rich merits upon us, your creation. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.
I ask that you please remain standing for our national anthem. As you see in our program, Mr. Rodney Small was supposed to play the national anthem for us, but he sends his apologies and we will have the anthem played.
St. Vincent land so beautiful, with joyful hearts we pledge to thee our loyalty and love and vow to keep you ever free. Whatever future brings, our faith will see us through. May peace reign from shore to shore, and God bless and keep us true. Irene, now fair and blessed Isle, your mountains high, so clear and green, a home to me, though I may stray, a haven calm serene. Whatever future brings, our faith will see us through. May peace reign from shore to shore, and God bless and keep sister islands are those gems, the lovely grenadines upon their seas, and golden sands the sunshine ever beams. Whatever future brings, our faith will see us through. May peace reign from shore to shore, and God bless and keep us true.
As your chairperson tonight, I am Hannah Hamilton, and as I told you before, it is an honor to be standing here as a past student of the University of the West Indies, and it is often commendable that these lectures are creating a forum where we can learn much about our history. So, without further ado, I would like to welcome Mrs. Deborah Dalrymple, the head of site for University of the West Indies, St. Vincent Open Campus.
His Excellency Francisco Perez Santana, Ambassador of Venezuela to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Mrs. Perez, Honorable Rennie Baptiste, Speaker of the House of Assembly of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, Dr. Adrian Fraser, our guest lecturer and past head of site of the Open Campus in St. Vincent, Mrs. Andrea Bowman, past headmistress of the Girls High School, Mr. Anthony Tibbles, Cultural Officer, Sir Errol Allen, members of the media, staff of the UWI Open Campus, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. And happy 39th Independence Anniversary. And happy 70th anniversary to the University of the West Indies, and congratulations to the Open Campus on achieving its 10th year milestone. There's much to celebrate. Welcome to the Sir Dwight Venner Memorial Independence Lecture. A special welcome to our guest speaker, Dr. Adrian Fraser, the previous head of site and resident tutor at the St. Vincent site. Dr. Fraser would speak on the topic, the role of the University of the West Indies in the post-colonial Caribbean, a topic which I'm sure is squarely in his ballpark, both as a member of the university family and as a historian. As you are aware, the Open Campus's annual Independence Lecture has been part of the Independence Celebration calendar for several years. Indeed, I think it was Dr. Fraser who started this tradition. However, the leadership of the Open Campus has encouraged us to rename our lectures as memorial lectures as a way to honor members of our community who may have made sterling contributions to national development or indeed regional development. In August, we relaunched the Emancipation Lecture as the Oscar Allen Memorial Emancipation Lecture, and tonight we have rebranded this lecture to respect and honor Sir Dwight Venner. It was an easy decision to make, and we are very proud to be associated. Sir Errol Allen will deliver some remarks on Sir Dwight shortly. This lecture, as well as the just concluded literary fair and the Our UWI, Our Music event, which will take place on November 10th at the Community College and for which tickets are still available, are all part of the celebration of the university's 70th anniversary. The university's strategic plan 2017 to 2022 is focused on 3 pillars. Firstly, increased access to the high quality tertiary and higher education provided by the UWI. Secondly, improved alignment in building of relationships with government and other international partners, and of course with our alumni, to ensure that we are meeting the needs of the society we serve. And thirdly, that the UWI remains agile in using its resources to respond to the needs of customers, including alumni, by creating a diversified revenue base and improving our global presence. The UWI has provided service and leadership to the Caribbean region for the past 70 years. In 2018, the UWI celebrates its evolution from 1948 as a university college and now boasts 4 campuses with approximately 50,000 students. There can be no doubt as to the tremendous contribution that the university has made to this region in a relatively short period of time. The university was also recently ranked among the top 5% in the Times Higher Education top 1,258 universities in the world for 2019, and was the only Caribbean-based university to make that prestigious list. I would not say more about the university, as I'm sure Dr. Fraser would cover most of this in his lecture. Let me take the opportunity to congratulate Ms. Renée Batiste, who recently received the Pelican Award as an outstanding alumna for her contribution to the university, the nation, and the region. She was one of 10 alumni so honored. I end these brief remarks by appealing to all of our alumni to participate in the life of the university, your university, our university. There are many ways in which you can contribute so that our university can improve on its very commendable ranking on the world stage. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Dalrymple. And I must reiterate that we are to support the University of the West Indies because it is our university. And Dr. Fraser will enlighten us tonight on the role of the University of the West Indies in the post-colonial Caribbean. So therefore, we'll have an idea of the reasons why we should really support and help our university to thrive in the 21st century, because we know that education right now is a very competitive field, and we want to ensure that our university stands strong. We're going to look to the program, and we're going to welcome Sir Errol Allen, who will give some brief remarks on Sir Dwight Venner. Of course, he is our independence lecture is in honor of Sir Dwight Venner, as Ms. Dalrymple highlighted previously.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. My brief remarks are titled The Sir Dwight Venner Story. Kenneth Dwight Venner was born here in St. Vincent in January 1946, a product of the well-known Jacobs and Venner families. He attended the St. Vincent Grammar School for a brief period in 1958, being shuttled off with his parents to Grenada, where his father had taken up an appointment in the colonial civil service. In Grenada, the young Venner attended the Grenada Boys Secondary School, representing the island in the halcyon days of the Inter-Schools Tournament. This was a shortened term for what was the Inter-Island Secondary Schools Tournament. He scored 97 for Grenada in their cricket match against St. Vincent, at a time when he thought he might develop into a test cricketer. But that was not to be. For when his father took up an appointment as financial secretary, he was then moved over to St. Lucia, and the young Dwight entered St. Mary's College, where he concluded his secondary education. This was followed by his admission to the Mona campus of the University of the West Indies, UWI, attaining the bachelor's and master's degree in economics with a specialization in monetary economics. Clearly, an academic profession was beckoning. Fast track. As an economist, Sir Dwight was first appointed as a research assistant at the Mona campus of the university, before being appointed a lecturer in economics. In 1981, upon the imminent retirement of the Financial Secretary of St. Lucia, Mr. George Girard, some forward-thinking St. Lucians came up with the idea that the young Dwight Venner, who by then had acquired a St. Lucian as his spouse, would be a good candidate to fill the position of Financial Secretary. The idea gained momentum, and Sir Dwight was invited back, and in the fullness of time was appointed to the position of Director of Finance and Planning. From this position, he later served as Director on the board of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank when the institution was upgraded to a central bank. Not without ambition, when the presidency of the Caribbean Development Bank became vacant in the 1980s, Sir Dwight advanced his name as a potential candidate. But his time had not yet come. In retrospect, he may even have acknowledged to himself that it was not his best fit. Sir Dwight succeeded the ECCB first governor, Sir Cecil Jacobs, in December 1989. He was a visionary, always fully engaged, and with a tremendous capacity to work around the clock when the circumstances demanded. In the mid-1990s, when the news broke on a Sunday afternoon of an imminent crisis in London involving a financial institution with which the ECCB had relations in the management of its foreign reserves, his immediate reaction was to summon critical staff to the bank for a 2:30 a.m. confab prior to the opening of the market in London, given the time difference between the two jurisdictions. Having assumed the position of governor at a time when the initial plans had already been made for the construction of new headquarters for the bank, Sir Dwight succeeded with the approval of the Monetary Council, and this council really comprised prime ministers of the various countries, for the restructuring of the plans with the future very much in mind. During his tenure, he lifted the institution to a higher level, where it commanded peer respect throughout the CARICOM region and internationally. Indeed, when the European Union was planning the establishment of the European Central Bank, an official from the French Treasury, who was based in the country's embassy in Mexico, visited the ECCB headquarters in St. Kitts for discussions and to learn from the experience of someone who had gained experience in a multi-state central bank. The vision of Sir Dwight led him to restructure the organization, laying the foundation for the establishment of institutions such as the Eastern Caribbean Securities Exchange and the Eastern Caribbean Home Mortgage Bank, and instruments to operate in the OECS financial market. He was particularly pleased with the fact that the Securities Exchange operated from the most technologically advanced platform in the CARICOM region. In the mid-1990s, he began to urge the OECS indigenous banks towards a policy of consolidation, as he saw the time was fast approaching when the standalone institutions could no longer survive in a fast-changing and highly competitive world environment. Ladies and gentlemen, it would be most fitting if, as a part of Sir Dwight's legacy, our region could fully embrace this policy, which he fought so long to bring to fruition. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sir Alan. Sir Dwight Venner is a man with a great legacy, and such a legacy should definitely inspire us to leave our mark in history as well. Tonight, we're going to have a performance, a dance group performance from the St. Joseph Convent dance group. We're going to have a cultural presentation, and I would like for you to welcome our young persons.
I'm a slave from a land so far. I was caught and I was brought here from Africa. I'm a slave from a land so far. I was caught and I was brought here from Africa. Well, it was lips like fire from the white slave master. Every day I down on my knees. Weeks and weeks before we crossed the seas to reach in the West Indies. And they made me, oh Lord, no pay. I said, so hard each day. I'm dying. I'm crying. Oh Lord, I want to be free. Many times I wanted to run, but the English slave master was standing there with his gun. Oh, I know he would shoot to kill. So I stay and I pray, but I'm planning still. I study night and day how to break away. I got to make a brilliant escape. But every time I think about the whip and them dogs, me body just start to shake. They make me work and work so hard. I said I toil so hard each day. I'm dying. Oh Lord, I'm crying. Oh Lord, oh Lord, I want to be free. Mama said it won't always be so. And as sure as day follows night, our triumph followed our struggle. The suffering took flight, free at last.
very much to the St. Joseph Convent Dance Group. That was a very enlightening performance. And I'm sure after seeing that, we are all grateful for our ancestors who struggled and fought for our freedom, because today we are free. We are free to learn, we are free to live, we are free to marry, we are just free to survive and be happy. I am very sure we are happy for that, right? Yes. So now we're going to welcome Mrs. Monica Brown, the program officer at the University of the West Indies Open Campus, to introduce our speaker for tonight.
Good evening, everyone. Protocol having already been established, it's my pleasure to introduce to you this evening our very own Dr. Adrian Fraser. He's very familiar to all of us, but we still have to introduce him. So Dr. Adrian St. Aubin Fraser holds a PhD in history, University of the West Indies, University of Western Ontario, Canada, a certificate in social development from Cody Institute, Nova Scotia, and a PhD in MPhil, in history from the University of the West Indies, Cape Verde, Barbados, and a BA Honors History, University of Western Ontario, Canada. He is presently retired, having done so in September 2011 as resident tutor and head of the UWI Open Campus in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. As a member of the staff of the university, he served as a member of a number of committees, including the Senate, the Task Force for the UWI 2007-2012 Strategic Plan, the Open Campus Working Group, the Board of Non-Campus Countries and Distant Education, and the Social and Economic Research Task Force on Public Policy Issues, and many, many more. He also served as coordinator of the Caribbean People's Development Agency, CARIPEDA, and the Glebe Development Project, which is a project in Barely, his hometown, sponsored by the Caribbean Conference of Churches. Prior to this assignment, he served as graduate master, teaching history and general paper at both the St. Vincent Grammar School and the St. Vincent Girls High School. From 2016 to now, he's a member of the board of directors of Interactive Media Limited and has been a columnist with the Searchlight newspaper since 1995. Dr. Fraser's service to the St. Vincent and the Grenadines go beyond his work at the university. He was a voluntary member of several committees and boards, including the Education Training Committee of St. Vincent and the Grenadines Chamber of Industry and Commerce, the Board of Governors of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Community College, the Education Advisory Board, the Technical Working Group with responsibility for the National Pride, Culture and Centenary, and many numerous and other organizations and bodies, including his church, the Methodist Church. Dr. Fraser was an ardent sportsman and a sports enthusiast, lent his considerable experience to the Cricket Association. He was also president of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Football Association. He has many publications and articles, which include the Primary Social Studies for the Caribbean, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which is a Macmillan education, the 1935 riots in St. Vincent, from riots to adult suffrage, from Shaker to spiritual Baptist, the struggle for the survival of the Shakers of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Chatelier, first national hero of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the socio-historic and linguistic account of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which he did with Perla Prescott, language issues in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, that was edited also by Paula Prescott and John Benjamins. As a historian, he has also presented many papers at conferences and seminars, such as re-examining the data on the origin of the Garifuna people, the history of the trade unionism in the Caribbean, from villain to national hero, revisiting the story of Chateaubriand, revisiting history, the impact of the 1797 expulsion of the Garifuna on the development of St. Vincent and the Grenadines as a nation state, and of course, a seminal radio program from whence we came. I'm sure you all remember that program. A radio series on the history of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you, Dr. Fraser.
I'm going to crave your indulgence to allow me to make my presentation from here. Well, protocol has already been established. I want to welcome and say good evening to you who are here with us tonight, and also those who are listening to radio and also live stream on the internet. And to thank you for joining me in some reflections on the university over its 70-year existence, and also focusing on the role that the university is playing in today's Caribbean. So I find it a distinct honor to be given the opportunity at this time to present this lecture. And in fact, I was quite animated by the news that the Times Higher Education World University latest rankings has the UWI listed among the top 5% of universities worldwide. This speaks volumes, as Mrs. Dalrymple said, given the size of the region and our limited resources, and it is something for which we should be proud. Of course, we have the tendency to await outside recognition before we could acclaim what we have. Additionally, I want to draw your attention to something which appeared in the media some time ago, and it was about a 21-year-old Vincentian student, Tessa Sherian Tracy, who was among a batch of 30 students to go to China for the final 2 years of a BSc software engineering program that the UWI is doing with its Chinese partner, the Global Institute of Software Technology. This is a major step in preparing our students, and by extension, the region, to participate in the global technological environment. These I will say something more about later on. Let me recognize too that this university's annual Independence Lecture is now the Sir Dwight Venner Memorial Independence Lecture. So Dwight had been the chairman of the board of the Open Campus from its origin. Moreover, and I don't think many people remember that, he was the person who delivered the first Independence Lecture in 1999. But I want to add a personal anecdote. So Dwight and I entered the St. Vincent Grammar School at the same time and became close friends. In the second term, I issued a challenge to him. It was for a cricket match involving a team of first formers against a team I was bringing from Barley. He agreed. On that Saturday of the encounter, we bowled them out for under 20, and I had a hearty laugh, given the way boys from Kingston look down on boys from the country. He, however, had the last laugh, but only to a point, because later on, well, he had moved to Grenada and then to St. Lucia, and I believe it was in St. Lucia, he was part of the cricket team that participated in the inter-school games, and I was captain of the St. Vincent Grammar School team. He scored a stubborn 93, not out. but we eventually won the game and the tournament. So all of this is in honor and memory of Sir Dwight. Now my approach to tonight's lecture, not a gunshot. I begin by looking at the socio-political and economic environment of the period when the university was established. Then briefly at its establishment, and will single out some of the highlights over its 70-year existence, before reflecting on the university as it is today and focusing on how it is functioning in today's Caribbean. Now let me state up front that this is not a lecture about the institution itself and its internal dynamics. That is for another type of discussion. So, the socio-political and economic environment at the time of the establishment, 1948. And 1948 was 3 years before countries, well, colonies at that time, like St. Vincent and some of the other colonies, were granted adult suffrage. And 10 years before we had what I call a stillborn federation. That 10-year period was profoundly influenced and shaped by the disturbances and riots of the 1930s that rocked the British colonies. St. Vincent being the second island to have been rocked or locked in disturbances. The British government belatedly recognized that there was something wrong in the colonies and set up a commission, the Royal West Indian Commission, or sometimes called the Moyne Commission, that visited, described the state of things in the islands, and made recommendations that influenced the British government's approach to the colonies. Now, a major development from these disturbances was the rise of a regional workers' movement. And pertinent to this discussion is the launching of the Caribbean Labour Congress at its inaugural meeting in Barbados in 1945. What is significant is that the call at this time for the establishment of a university came from this regional workers' movement. And that came through some resolutions which were passed in 1945. And the relevant resolution stated, this conference, that is the meeting of the Caribbean Labour Congress, advocates strongly the immediate establishment of a West Indian university with the highest academic and living standards, to which admission will be the test of ability and not means, end of quote. It also advocated the expansion of free elementary education to accommodate the children of school age. And one of the other resolutions was to send a delegation to London to state its case for federation with self-government. And interestingly enough, and we're talking about 1945, they saw education as being fundamental to a federation, since, as they stated, a democracy depended on people's ability to think and form sound opinions. Now, it should be of interest to know that the person who chaired the session on education was our own George McIntosh. And although I'm not in favor of having another national hero until we have given full due to Chatelier, I have been advocating that our next national hero be George McIntosh. Now, although this Royal Commission, which was established, skirted around the whole idea of university education, and I should also point out that there were many efforts before to establish a university, but these were really fruitless. But the Secretary of State for the Colonies, Oliver Stanley, after being shocked by what was happening in the region and also the call in Africa to end colonial rule, decided to establish a commission to look into higher education in the colonies that form part of his portfolio, particularly colonies in Africa and the West Indies. He wrote also to the vice chancellors of the British universities, seeking their help in establishing colonial universities. And the committee for St. Vincent, called the Irving Committee, agreed fully on the establishment of a university, but one that was centralized and residential. Now, according to them, for this to be possible, the British government would have to take care of the capital costs and also share the recurrent costs with the colonial governments. And it called, in order for this to be possible, it called for the provision of scholarships and student loans and the establishment of a Department of Extramural Studies with provision for an external degree from a university in England of repute. Eventually, the university that was decided on was the University of London. So, in 1848, we had the establishment of the University College of the West Indies, with priority given to medicine. And to a large extent, this is because the Moyne Commission drew attention in the West Indies to the inadequate health situation with high infant mortality rate, the prevalence of chronic diseases, and the inadequate training of medical personnel. So they decided that the priority should be on medicine. Now, it was to be established in Jamaica at Mona, and parts of the old Papine and Mona estates of over 600 acres with a picturesque mountain range in the background. And anybody who's familiar with Jamaica would realize how picturesque a scene it is, was leased for 999 years. You could still see the aqueducts from the old sugar estates. The University Chapel, one of the centerpieces of the campus, was actually built with limestone from blocks from an 18th century rum store on one of the estates in Jamaica. And one source said that very often preachers at services at the chapel would remind the congregation that the stones that once symbolized the burden of slavery now represented freedom. Also, at that site was on Gibraltar streets were wooden buildings, and these wooden buildings had been erected in the war to house refugees from Malta and Gibraltar. That's why it's called Gibraltar Street. Priority was, as I said, to be given to medicine with a teaching hospital. And so even before the buildings were completed, 33 medical students began their academic journey. And I was trying to find out which was the first Vincentian student to have gone to Mona. And it appeared that that first student, who was a medical student, was Dr. Kenan Trobus, who was the son of someone who became the education officer, and also the husband of Peggy Ann Trobus, who a lot of us know because of her involvement in one that's part of the University of the West Indies. So in 1948, medicine, 33 medical students. In 1949, they added natural sciences, arts in 1950, and social sciences in 1958. Now, this journey in 1948 began against the backdrop of a move toward a federation of the colonies. And the university was supposed to reflect that sentiment and to be an evangelist for federation. In 1960, a second campus was established, and this was in Trinidad at the site of the Imperial College of Tropical Agriculture, and that site became the Faculty of Agriculture. In 1961 also, in Trinidad was established the Faculty of Engineering. In 1962, the following year, the University College became a fully fledged independent university of the West Indies, with its first vice-chancellor being Sir Arthur Lewis, who in 1979 was the recipient of the Nobel Prize in Economics. I must mention also, while on this, that one of the early graduates of the UWI was Sir Derek Walcott of St. Lucia, who became the second Nobel laureate, winning the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1992. Walcott graduated in 1953, which meant that he was among the first group of arts students at the university. After graduation in 1953, he remained for an additional year doing a postgraduate degree in education, and while there held the position of president of the Mona Dramatic Society. In 1963, a Barbados campus was established with courses in arts and natural sciences that were also introduced in St. Augustine. And in Barbados, by 1970, a faculty of law. The Barbados campus started in temporary quarters at the waterfront before moving up to Cave Hill when the buildings were ready. So, 70 years after this month, the babe that grew out of the womb of the sugar estates has now turned 70. And to mark its growth in a region with a population of just over 6 million from 16 or so countries that contribute to it, that institution, as was pointed out, is celebrating its birthday with the news that it has made its way onto the Times Higher Education World University Rankings, and as Mrs. Dalrymple said, the only university in the Caribbean to have done that. It finds itself within the top 5% of over 25,000 globally recognized universities. It is listed among the top 1,268 universities, being placed at 591 or 591st out of 1,258 universities, which means within the top 50%. It was highly rated according to a press release for its international outlook and research influence. This is really a good assessment of its growth over 70 years. And despite the number of issues and challenges which faced it during that period of time. The other bit of news that calls for some celebration, and this is at Cave Hill, is that the Faculty of Medicine, the last to have been established in 2008, has now been recognized by the National Committee on Foreign Medical Education and Accreditation of the Department of Education in the United States. Its MBBS program is considered equivalent to what is used for accreditation of US medical schools. As I suggested earlier, these are of significance in a region where we tend to look outside for acclaim before we appreciate. I've often told students over the years, students who are interested in medicine, that if, for instance, they went to New York and lived in the New York, New Jersey area, it was likely that if they went to any of the clinics or hospitals, that they will be serviced by a high number and high proportion of the doctors would have been doctors trained at the University of the West Indies. Now, let us go on to look at the university as it is today. 3 traditional campuses and 1 open campus, and this open campus has branches in all of the contributing countries of the university. Based on statistics from the Vice Chancellor's report to the University Council, again, as Mrs. Dalrymple said, it now has a student population of 50,000 and caters to many students even from outside the region. 76% of the students are pursuing undergraduate studies, with 23.4% being postgraduates. The open campus, 87% are undergraduates. And to show again the development from 33 students, last year, 2017, 10,000 students graduated from the university, with over 6,000 receiving undergraduate degrees, about 3,000 higher degrees, and with the others being recipients of diplomas, certificates, and some postgraduate diplomas and certificates. Of the 50,000 enrolled, 83% are on-campus students. The open campus, about 12.8%, with 13.6% of those being associated with tertiary and affiliated institutions or through distance education. Now, it is of interest that the faculties with the most full-time students are social sciences, medical sciences, science, and technology. And there are some gender statistics to which I think we need to pay attention. Of a total enrollment, females constitute, that is in all the campuses, 68.6%, and males 31%. I must highlight the fact that the open campus has an enrollment of 85% females. Now, this one is very interesting, and I recall at least two cases where there were two young ladies who had entered the open campus, and I noticed that after a few weeks they disappeared. And on both cases, they told me that their boyfriends told them not to continue. And that's why I said that we need to pay attention to it, because some of these guys really felt threatened. And this whole gender issue is one which we as a society need to pay a lot of attention to. Of interest too is that in engineering at St. Augustine, there are 71% males and 29% females. And in science and technology at Cave Hill, 51% males and 49% females. Traditionally, these two faculties have been male-dominated. The Faculty of Engineering still has a far way to go in order to be able to balance that male-female ratio. The UWI has during this time been spreading its global links and presence, and has links with over 100 universities globally. And they have students and faculty from over 80 countries. Now, one can understand why in the rankings by the Times Higher Education, in the Times Higher Education ranking, it placed strongly in an international outlook. And I want to make the point that given the region's need to strengthen and survive in a global environment that is technologically driven, and given also the presence of the Caribbean diaspora in the UK and in North America, the need to diversify our relationships and to tap into sources and resources in those areas, we need to strengthen that global presence. And the university has been pointing its way in this direction. I want to highlight 4 areas. Now, the region is still lagging behind regarding technological application and being part of the digital revolution. For of course, as we know, the global environment has changed radically over the years with the onset of what is called the digital revolution, sometimes referred to as the third industrial revolution, following, of course, the agricultural revolution and the second industrial revolution. We have seen the shift perhaps from the 1950s with this change from what we could describe then as electronic, technologically, to digital electronics. And of course, this is an introduction to the information age. And what we also have to pay very much attention to is that all of this is transforming the way people do business, the way things are produced in many parts of the world. And if we are to step into this and to be able to participate in this global environment, we would also have to transform the way we produce and the way we go about doing our business. Now, the UWI has again been leading this way, and I mentioned its relationship with China. And it has established a UWI China Institute of Information Technology that focuses on software engineering, concentrating on mobile and technical application. Under that program, students spend 2 years at one of the university or any of the university campuses, and then the last 2 years in China. So that when I made reference to that Vincentian student, she was part of that program. They have done 2 years at UWI, and they're going to do the final 2 years in China. And according to a report from the UWI, and I want to quote from this report, it says this partnership with China allows students to take advantage of the strong industrial link between the institute and technological companies in the heart of China's, well, in bracket, or in quotation marks, Silicon Valley, including the guarantee of paid internships at Fortune 500 companies in the industrial park in Suzhou. The UWI, we are told, has been recognized as an approved university by the Ministry of Education of China, which means that UWI degrees are now accepted by the Chinese authorities. There are other internationally recognized universities that are also part of this. So I've put some emphasis on this because of China's leading role in this age of new technology. There are other initiatives in this global expanse, and I just want to mention two others, or three others. One that is of significance is that we have established the State University of New York, UWI Center for Leadership and Sustainable Development. And this, of course, will facilitate and build our links with the Caribbean diaspora in that area. And as you know, a large number of Caribbean people attended the State University of New York, and they share common interests with the University of the West Indies. And interestingly enough, one of the first activities they had was a symposium entitled Crisis in Correspondent Banking and its Impact on Sustainable Economic Development in the Caribbean. And this, of course, is something which we need to pay very much attention to. And it is interesting that at that symposium, it attracted a large number of financial and banking experts. So already that kind of relationship is paying attention to an issue which we have to deal with. There are two links with Africa, and as we are aware, Africa is the ancestral home of the majority of Caribbean people. One is with the University of Johannesburg in South Africa, with the establishment of an Institute of Global African Affairs, operating in both universities, and an Institute of Africa and Diaspora Studies with the University of Lagos in Nigeria. And in both cases, they're going to be dealing with matters of relevance to the UWI and to those two African countries, including issues relating to reparations, post-colonial governance, climate change, and solidarity in global affairs. Of course, one of the goals of the nations of the Caribbean since independence has been to diversify its relationship and to build relationships, particularly with countries in the third world. Recently, earlier this year, while addressing the graduation ceremony at Cave Hill, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Ghana invited the University of the West Indies to deepen its links with that university. And the Vice Chancellor noted, and I quote, "The bond that has developed will allow us to speak with one voice on pertinent global issues of poverty, disease, squalor, inequality, discrimination, and marginalization that have been inflicted on our people through the evils of slavery and colonialism," end of quote. And please note, as I make this point about the University of Ghana, that when the University of the West Indies was established in 1948, the University of Ghana was also established and was part of that same initiative. So it was important that they're able to build that kind of link. On the issue of global presence, I just want to draw your attention to the fact that in 1966, the university had conferred an honorary LLD degree on the Emperor of Ethiopia, Haile Selassie, and later on in 1991 on Nelson Mandela. So that is part of this extending its global presence. I want now to pay some more attention to what is happening in what we consider the post-colonial Caribbean. And so far, what I've done is just to highlight some of the developments over those 70 years. What do I mean by post-colonial Caribbean? By definition, post-colonial Caribbean means just what it says. It means that we have severed or severing the colonial ties. And Caribbean societies are still young, independent nations, the oldest, of course, being 56 years, Trinidad and Jamaica. But post-colonial involves much more. It involves a period of decolonizing that is breaking away from the colonial mother and establishing our own identity. This, of course, is often a long period, for it means not only getting rid of the colonial legacy, but at the same time, accommodating ourselves to the demands of a global environment within which we have to interface, and which, of course, sets its own agenda. So how does the university fit into this? And I want to, first of all, make a very important point, because when we are speaking about colonization, one important aspect of colonization is education. And I want to draw your attention to a speech which was made to Parliament in 1835 by Lord Macaulay, that is in Britain. There's a lot of dispute as to when and where the speech was really made. But what he said, and I want to quote him, he said, and he's speaking about India, and he paid particular attention to India. In fact, he was one of the persons responsible for introducing English into the Indian education system and also for westernizing the Indian education system. He says, and I quote, "I have traveled across the length and breadth of India and have not seen one person who is a beggar, who is a thief. Such wealth I've seen in this country, such high moral values, people of such caliber that I do not think will ever conquer this country unless we break the very backbone of this nation, which is her spiritual and cultural heritage. And therefore, I propose that we replace her old and ancient education system, her culture. For if the Indians think that all that is foreign and English is good and greater than their own, they will lose self-esteem, their native culture, and they will become what we want them, a truly dominated nation, end of quote. Now, as I said, there's some dispute over the validity of this, but in essence, that is what he has done, because he, as I said, was a major player in introducing English into the Indian education system and also in westernizing that system. There's a Kenyan writer, Ngunji Wathiongo, who in one of his books, Decolonizing the Mind, refers to colonialism as a cultural bomb. And he says that it is geared to annihilate a people's belief in their names, in their languages, in their capacities, and ultimately in themselves. And really, this is what Lord Macaulay was saying in 1835. In exploring the role of the university today, I want to refer to many of the issues and challenges that were encountered over those 70 years, some of which, of course, still continues. Perhaps the most challenging has to do with financing. The original arrangement was that the British government would meet the capital costs and that recurrent costs would be shared with the contributing colonies. Once the Federation was proclaimed, the main burden of financing the institution was placed on contributing governments. And the university's expansion, however, over a period of time, meant that it placed an enormous burden on, it made, in fact, huge demands. At the time of the Federation, the university was able to deal with one government, the federal government. That is the body with which it negotiated. But the Federation's collapse and the emergence of single independent nations posed problems, particularly with the reality of 3 different campuses, because what was happening is that as these countries became independent, tensions grew. Instead of a regional university, they were making demands for certain things to happen within their individual countries. So there was that kind of tension, and the university stood as a lone regional body and had to contend with this and was able to skillfully negotiate its existence as a regional identity. Of course, there's always the danger that he who pays the piper will call the tune. And I think that over the years, we can find cases where one could say that this might have been so. But generally, the university is able to negotiate and to maintain its independence over those 70 years. Eventually, in 1995, the heads of governments guaranteed the life of the university in perpetuity. But what happened then is that it involved negotiating with individual countries rather than with one single university as with the Federation. And the big problem is that the economic crisis, which really came on at about 2008, is still with us, and a number of countries have had problems living up to what they have pledged to the university. So millions of dollars are still owed to the university, but a proposal that was made recently to heads of government meeting, I think in Haiti, seemed to be paving the way. And as the Vice Chancellor is very confident about its success. The proposal states that where cash is not readily available, that the countries could give performing assets or land. And we have seen efforts being made by the Prime Minister of Barbados to honor her commitments to the university despite the kind of economic state that is facing Barbados. And so Hilary Beckles indicates that the Barbados Prime Minister regards the obligation to the university as part of its national debt, which is very important. And she made a pledge that never again would they renege on their financial obligations to the University of the West Indies. So this is really a very positive thing. There's also some development in Trinidad where the Prime Minister of Trinidad, apart from coming up with some cash payments, also signed an agreement, and this was quoted in the Barbados Today. The Prime Minister, apart from coming up with cash payments, quote, signed an agreement to transfer a brand new state-of-the-art public hospital in Couva, East Trinidad, as a performing asset. Now, this is something which is still in the stage of development and which the university and the government of Trinidad will work out. What is becoming clear now is that the different nations of the Caribbean, the members of CARICOM, are realizing that the university, to contribute to the university is to make an important investment in Caribbean development. So it started from paying to keep the university to a realization that this is a body that is important and they have to invest in it as part of Caribbean development. So the university from the beginning was expected to play an essential role, first of all, in the process leading to federation and serving in that new designation, which is the federal state. But the collapse of the federation and the emergence of independent nations, as I said before, threatened that. And what we're seeing today is in the face of the growing nationalism, the university, and to emphasize what I said before, has remained perhaps the sole symbol of Caribbean integration. We used to say the West Indies cricket team, but I think many of us are now embarrassed to talk about the Caribbean. The West Indies cricket team as a symbol of Caribbean integration. And of course, CARICOM is still struggling to create a single market and economy. Now, generally, what is the role of the university? Its role really is to provide teaching, research, and service. And of course, over the years, what the university has done is to help to develop a large percentage of the region's human resources. It has provided teachers for the schools and colleges throughout the region. It spearheaded the creation of the CXC and provided consultants to that body. It has helped with the overhaul of curricula to target the needs and demands of what were now independent nations or independent societies. Its call to interested colleges to become colleges of the University of the West Indies is already being answered. And among those that have expressed an interest is the GC Foster College of Physical Education. And I mention this deliberately because I know we have some students who are attending the GC Foster College of Physical Education. The university has also done outstanding work, particularly in history, in helping to create a new identity and to subvert Eurocentric thinking, which of course existed at the time of independence. It has assisted the private sector and governments in building the human resources. And better or for worse, it has been supplying leaders that control governments in the region. I take a break, a break now for a water break, sorry. Now, I want to single out work in the medical field because, as was noted before, particular attention was given and priority was given to medicine. And recently, Professor Sir Henry Fraser of Barbados, in reflecting on the 70-year-old faculties of medicine, noted that the faculties of medicine at the University of the West Indies have trained 9,000 doctors, 5,000 graduating from Mona, that is in Jamaica, 3,000 from St. Augustine in Trinidad, and 800 from Cave-Hill. Many, of course, as he stated, have left the region, but in doing so, they have also carried with them the reputation of the University of the West Indies and are also highlighting the region. They have done outstanding work, he points out, not only in the region, but also staffing regional and international bodies. And a very good example of this is Sir George Alleyne, who recently retired as Chancellor of the University of the West Indies. He had for a long time been director of PAHO. And the Vincentians are among some of the top graduates of the faculties of medicine and have performed exceptionally well. We have, to draw a few examples, Dr. Albert Lockhart in the field of ophthalmology, where he used ganja as an essential ingredient to eye cures. And this was done long before we are speaking about marijuana and medical marijuana. He has been doing that for quite a long time. We also have another Vincentian, Dr. Olin Harry, in cardiology, and a later graduate who is still serving us here, Dr. Hughes Duggan, was listed among the top 50 surgeons in his field in New Jersey a few years ago, and he is still performing services here. Other graduates of the University of the West Indies are in St. Vincent and performing useful service. Now, Sir Henry Fraser declared that what is distinctive about teaching at the UWI, and to quote him, is that it is tailoring local training to local priorities. And he says that the emphasis is on clinical assessment and examination, as opposed to the emphasis in some other countries on costly investigations. He states that this is something which has been discussed very much in medical literature. And he points out that significant work has been done in diabetes, hypertension, stroke, cancer, disease surveillance, and other areas. But he also points out, and it's something which we need to pay attention to, he said that very often the medical training and research has not been translated into best practices, which is something not only the university should stand guilty of, but also the governments and the people of the region. Now, while I'm on this topic of medicine, a recent scandal in Barbados with the Washington University of Barbados should sensitize us to the danger of fake offshore universities and degree mills. Of course, there are many offshore for-profit medical schools in the region that are providing valuable services, but others are suspect. And this one in Barbados is really very questionable. And there are two things that has struck me about, well, even before that we had the situation with the Ross University going to Barbados. And one of the things that struck me about that is that the government seemed to have somehow made a commitment to facilitate their accreditation. Now, this is something which governments really should not have a part of their independent bodies. And particularly in Barbados, they were under the impression that somehow this government, this minister of government, was going to facilitate their accreditation. Apart from medicine, Other areas which I need to highlight is the area of sustainable economic development. And this, especially at a time when we are trying to shift from a sole concentration on agriculture and tourism and finance to what is happening today in the world, knowledge-based economies as part of this information technology. But the university has been playing a leading role for quite a long time, since the 1960s and 70s, because at the time when a lot of these countries became independent or were thinking of becoming independent, the region was trying to explore its own path to economic development and searching for a Caribbean way. And you had economists, in particular the University of the West Indies, playing a very important role. You had, for instance, the New World, which had branches in all of the campuses and which also spawned branches in other regions. You had in St. Vincent and a number of the other regions, groups which grew out or which were stimulated by the New World. So that period of the 60s and 70s was a period when there was a lot of hope and confidence, when people in the Caribbean felt that there was a Caribbean way and that we could find that Caribbean way. But from the 1980s, things shifted. Globalization became the order of the day, and we had deregulation and privatization. And we could see this particularly with the WTO. And we know the case of our bananas, where the WTO decided that there would be deregulation and we would have to compete with everybody else, people who are able to produce on a much cheaper rate than we are. So that period from the 1980s, period of globalization, changed the whole situation. And from very early, people at the university had been warning us about the need to move in this direction. And I want to point out, for instance, that in 1988, that is the year in which Gilbert struck Jamaica. The person who assumed vice chancellorship of the university was Sir Alistair McIntyre of Grenada. And he challenged his colleagues and the region, and he says, future growth will depend on whether we set about making the transition from a pattern of development principally dependent on natural resources to one dependent on human resources and knowledge. So these were the shifts that were taking place, and he was warning his colleagues and also the region that we need really to get on board where this was concerned. And the university was expected to play an important role in that transition. In fact, from very early, well, I shouldn't say from very early, but from 2012, the mission statement of the university committed the university to Caribbean development. And recently, in its new 5-year strategic plan that is from 2017 to 2022, it has as a theme, that is the university, revitalizing Caribbean development. And what it is seeking to do is really to align itself in its strategic plan to the goals of CARICOM. And it has made a call for a partnership not only with governments, but with the private sector and with non-governmental bodies. Because the need, it is understood, the need for innovation to improve on productivity, on the way we produce, in order for us to compete globally, demand that there be this relationship between academia and the not only governments, but private enterprise. Because for too long, what has happened is that research at the university has laid untapped. But we are now beginning to see an effort made to create a partnership between what is happening at the university and the private sector. For instance, we have a number of MOUs between the university, one with the, not too long ago, the private sector organization of Jamaica, and we have with a number of the banks, the Caribbean Development Bank, the IADB, and with a number of private sector organizations to make sure that what research is done informs what is happening where production is concerned, and that it helps the research from the university will help to industrialize research in the Caribbean. So we see a number of things happening. For instance, one of the things that is due to be on board soon is a software technology center to be established in Barbados. So a number of things are happening, and the university is an essential part of them. The goal of having research inform innovation in production is being pursued by all campuses, and there are just a few examples I want to give to you. At the University of St. Augustine in Trinidad, the Research and Development Impact Fund has begun to see some of its projects inform what is happening in key government ministries and also in benefiting certain communities. So they're moving research from academia into the communities and into government. The Faculty of Agriculture in Trinidad has a 200-acre farm, which has established in collaboration with China's Agriculture University. And this is meant to showcase advanced agricultural production methodologies using technologies and best practices, not only from China, but also from indigenous production and knowledge in the Caribbean. Generally, the research at that faculty and at the university generally is meant to be available to entrepreneurs throughout the Caribbean, and also to provide expertise and research in all regions related to the region. Now, KPhil is in the process, and I just want to pay particular attention to this, of developing lands, Duke lands, and this initiative is to be coordinated by Vincentian Professor Leonard O'Garrow, who is director of the Center for Food Security and Entrepreneurship. And what this development involves is a state-of-the-art agribusiness park. It is, according to a release from the university, to be a regional hub for entrepreneurial development, education, training, and cutting-edge agribusiness research. And this is coming at a time when we all are aware that our agriculture really needed to be lifted to a higher level. So some of the land will be used for farming, facilities will exist for agro-processing, chocolate manufacturing, cotton processing. There will be a food standards laboratory, a sewage treatment plant, and a 500-seat conference facility. So I want to emphasize that this is very timely at the stage when we are beginning to realize how important agriculture continues to be to our economies. I want to just mention, as I come to an end, the impact of natural disasters. And I think what has happened with Irma and Maria over last year and over the past few years with other hurricanes have brought home clearly to the region that we are exposed, or we are vulnerable, and that we need to begin to pay a lot of attention to sustainability and to resilience. So the university has to become a very important part of it. It has a lot of expertise